Day 148 to 12:31 p.m. Factory Area, Rebel Base, San Pablo Poblacion, Municipality of Vega, Catanduanes. Emilin's rampage continued, causing more and more blood to spill. Renz and his men wanted to run away already. However, as Emilin began to prioritize targeting those who started to run away, they could only stop. If any of them ran first, they could allow others to run away too. But of course, the first ones would definitely die. And unfortunately, none of them wanted to become a sacrifice for the others. It created the scene where the majority of them on the ground got pinned down. The only leeway was those at higher elevations continued to fire their guns in hopes of stopping the leader they betrayed. Of course, their bullets were just like BB pellets that buffeted a concrete wall. While listening to Felix's storytelling, Mark continued to observe Emilin. Now that her story was known to him, the strangeness of her behavior vanished in his mind. Instead, he felt that it was just a normal thing for a person thirsty for revenge to go berserk at times like this. Emilin's behavior aside, Mark also observed her abilities, and to say, her skills seemed to contradict some traits with each other. Of course, it was aside from the visuals. During Emilin's lightning transformation, her hair was golden and flowed like flames, and her body was enveloped with electricity. When she attacked Mark, she was able to compete with him in terms of speed and body strength. But the only attack she used was those blades of solidified lightning and did not seem to have any means of ranged attacks. It was probable that she could not fire lightning similar to how Mark did. On the other hand, during Emilin's ice transformation, her hair turned still and ice-like. Her whole body was also covered in thin armor that seemed to be extremely compact ice. Because of this, not only her body moved slower, but it appeared to be a bit stiff. The ice on her body also seemed to be too heavy, but that weight only complemented its sturdiness. The last thing was that not only Emilin could burst out ice to form walls, but she could create large icicles to use as ranged attacks. In this observation, Mark concluded one thing. Emilin lacked perfect control over her abilities. It was something expected of a person like her, overflowing with the desire to take revenge. While Mark observed Emilin and watched her do his work, Felix continued his one-man storytelling. Mark did not request for the story of Emilin's past, but Felix just went on and on without minding Mark's faked reactions. Reaching the part where Emilin started her revenge, Mark interrupted Felix with a frown. "Why are you telling me all this?" Felix paused, turning to Mark with a wide playful smile. "I'm just trying to gain your sympathy. You know that?" Felix then tilted his head, reading Mark's actions, "Though I failed, horribly." Then, Felix stood up. "I know we're not your opponent at all. I rather not confront someone that can subdue a high-level summoner like Barak. But I can't just let the daughter of my friend die, fighting a monster like you." "That's not all, isn't it?" Mark asked interrogatively. "Whoa, you can tell." Felix laughed. "Well, you're right. What I said before is true. But that aside, I also want to advertise our services." "Services?" Mark tilted his head. "Right, services." Felix opened his arms forward like a business negotiator. "We dabble with information gathering, arms trade, and mercenary work. As long as you have the appropriate payment, we can give services around the globe." "You are saying that even though the world is already ending?" Mark mocked. But then, Felix tilted his head, eyes opened wide with a creepy playful smile. "What does the end of the world amount to? Business is business. It is even booming more than before. Who would not want our services in these rough times? We can find where safe places are, find information about enemies, or rent powerful soldiers to aid their endeavors." Mark fell silent. Although this guy was behaving like a crazy maniac right now, what he said was reasonable. The poor survivors might not be able to afford it, but rich people, secret organizations, and other hidden powers around the world would pay a huge amount for things they wanted. "So, this is why your group are scattered around the island, huh? Even the general's secretary at that." Mark smiled behind his mask. On the other hand, the creepy smile on Felix's face turned into a frown. "Looks like Roach is right. You're someone dangerous." Felix's voice still sounded playful, although the tone was much colder. Just how in the world did you know this? You said that you dabble in selling information. Why are you asking something that as obviously won't be answered? Mark mocked once more. Hey, you got me. Felix shrugged, returning to his playful demeanor. I won't pry on how you managed to find out about us, but I'd prefer it if you don't mess with our business. I'm not messing with you people, though, Mark shrugged. Or else, I would have already revealed that Vanessa was not just an ordinary military secretary as she appeared to be. But then, Mark realized. Maybe, are you talking about that? Mark pointed at the chaos he started below. Since you noticed it, it will be easier to explain. This is a mission I commissioned myself for my deceased friend and her daughter. But you just showed up and destroyed our plans. Why? Years of planning and resources had gone to waste. Just what is your reason for doing this? Felix added. However, even though he was saying as such, he was still in a playful mood. It seemed that he did not really mind that everything was a mess. That's your fault then. You shouldn't have let these ants run amok. If your goal is to let that woman get her revenge, you should have stuck to that and not let them lay their hands on other things. Mark smiled, not stating the specific reason. It led to Felix believing that the rebels had done something to offend Mark, leading to this situation. But he was not stupid. He could feel that while Mark slaughtered the rebels without remorse, he left the captured women alive. By the looks of it, the farming area where the captured men worked was also under attack. If that was the case, it must have something to do with the rebels capturing and forcing people to do their bidding. Felix sighed as his eyes fell on Renz. Capturing people and making them work by force was all that guy's idea. Emmeline only agreed to it with the premise of the rules she established. However, secretly, Renz had been doing things in the dark, like sending those forced men to a suicide mission last night. Since Felix was nurturing Emmeline's growth, he only provided her needed information and did not dabble in anything else in the rebel base. It looked like it was a mistake on his part. Felix shrugged, looking at the rampaging Emmeline. If all you wanted are those captured people, just take them away and leave. Felix said, shooing Mark with his hand. Mark smiled. Why should I? Felix could not help but frown. What do you want to say? I'm here to destroy this place and kill all the rebels. Why should I leave without finishing the work? Besides, with how that woman is behaving, I'm already on her list to take revenge on, right? Why should I leave such a threatening person alive? Can you give me a reason? Hey. I might not be able to give a reason, but there's no way I'll let you kill her. Felix sprang up from his position and jumped off the scaffold. He understood that Mark was not joking and took the initiative. Mark watched Felix as he moved towards the rampaging Emmeline. He could not help but feel strange as Felix ran with light steps, yet he was as fast as Emmeline in her lightning form. Felix was really a strange being in this regard. Knowing that Felix now wanted to take Emmeline and flee, Mark stretched his hand forwards. Crackle. Black lightning shot towards Emmeline. Emmeline, who had lost control due to her rage, did not manage to react to Mark's attack and would definitely get hit. But then, Felix turned his body around, throwing something into the trajectory of Mark's lightning attack. Bam! Like a shield, that item that Felix threw blocked the lightning bolt that Mark fired. Mark shot 2 more bolts of lightning, but like before, Felix blocked it without problems. Emmeline sensed that someone was approaching her and threw an icicle, not knowing that it was Felix. Nonetheless, Felix did not need any effort on dodging that cannon-like icicle. Then, Felix slipped through the attack and appeared in front of Emmeline. Emmeline, you need to stop now. We're leaving. Felix? Emmeline froze. It seemed that she managed to recognize Felix. However, she shook her head. No, that bastard Renz should die first. Crackle. Another roar of thunder was heard, making Felix click his tongue. This time, however, instead of defending against Mark's attack, Felix faced Emmeline. Forgive me, Felix said as he moved behind Emmeline and lightly tapped her nape. As Emmeline's nape was also covered with the ice armor, that tap would not be able to do anything. Creak. Unexpectedly, that light tap destroyed Emmeline's armor before she collapsed unconscious just in time before Mark's attack reached them. Bam! Suddenly, smoke enveloped the surroundings, obscuring anything that was happening below. However, Mark was sure that the two were still there and managed to evade that attack of his. Without waiting for anything, Mark prepared to fire another lightning attack. That was when a huge figure soared into the sky, surprising Mark. From what it appeared, it was a crow about the size of a car. Furthermore, instead of black feathers, it had ash-colored ones. On its back, the unconscious Emmeline lay. Even without his empathic detection, it was without question that this crow was Felix. Furthermore, it flew too fast. Faster than Mark, using all of his speed to fly. Mark's eyes then turned red, releasing sparks. Receiving Mark's mental attack, Felix staggered in the sky. However, it seemed that he had some resistance to it as he recovered immediately and flew away. Who would expect that that guy is a natural therianthrope? No wonder I can't feel any kind of magical or demonic energy on him. Mark murmured as he watched the shadow of Felix flying in the sky vanish from his sight. Oh, well. Mark shrugged. Asterisk 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 at the center of the battle, the smoke started to dissipate. Renz stood from his hiding place, looking around. What happened? Did that be asterisk tch leave? Then, Renz realized that Emmeline left as there was no trace of the woman anywhere. Ha ha ha. She left. Renz roared in glee. I'm still alive. Following Renz, the men following him started to celebrate. But then, Shing, huh? Renz voiced out in confusion as his vision suddenly turned around and upside down with the sensation that his head was floating. That was when he heard a voice. I thought you're smart. How come that you forgot about me? Renz wanted to turn to see where the voice came from and realized that he could not feel his body at all. But then, as his vision spun, he finally saw it. He saw Mark standing behind a headless body that was already spurting blood. Impossible. Renz voicelessly groaned as color and energy drained from his face. With a plop, Renz's decapitated head fell to the ground. And there was silence. Renz and his men were too focused and afraid of Emmeline that they totally forgot about Mark that was watching the show. Now, it's time to relive the nightmare. Mark smiled sinisterly. Day 148 to 1:24 p.m. Quarters, Rebel Base, San Pedro Poblacion, Municipality of Viga, Catanduanes. Blood splattered as Mark beheaded a rebel hiding inside the quarters building. With Ignis in his hand dripping with blood, Mark closed his eyes. This guy is the last one, huh? Mark murmured as he could not detect any rebels alive in the vicinity. This is the end of this place, we better get moving. Mark then left the quarters. As he stepped out of the door, someone landed in front of him. Even without his empathic detection, just those rainbow-scaled wings would tell who the person was. Mark smiled behind his mask. Good work, Mark said, patting May on her head. May meekly smiled. Gerger, are there no enemies left? Yep, Mark nodded. Right, I should fire another flare already. Swish. Bang. Mark fired the second flare to the sky, signaling the end of the operation. He ensured that the flare would hover directly above the factory area as there would be the meeting place. With that, Mark and May walked together towards the factory area. May then asked Mark a question. Gerger, what about those two that escaped? Are we just letting them go? Then why didn't you shoot them before they escaped? Mark asked back. Because Gerger did not seem keen on catching them. When they escaped, you didn't even give any effort to chase. May explained. In this battle, May's task was to get rid of the snipers on the watchtowers and those that might be capable of flight. That was why before Mark appeared inside the warehouse, May was already in the sky, watching for targets using the sun as cover. It was not because they were rushing that Mark chose to attack immediately this noon. Nighttime might be the best time for infiltration, rescue missions, assassinations, and other actions related to entering or ambushing an enemy base. History had proven such too many times. However, in this circumstance, noon, lunchtime to be exact, was the best timing. Mark's goal was to secure the safety of the captured people, including his sister, and during lunch, it was the only time that most people would be gathered in their respective allocated dining areas. It was the case not only here but everywhere where groups of people were being rationed food. Even Mark's base was not an exception, and for a place where people were being forced to work, it would be impossible that it would be a different case. Furthermore, with the arsenal of Mark's group, ability-wise and equipment-wise, there would be fewer constraints in planning and strategies. Even May could take advantage of the sun up in the sky to conceal herself and snipe the enemies she could find. After all, who would be an idiot to stare directly at the sun? And since human capabilities were enhanced by mutagen, doing the same at night would be riskier, making May easier to be found. Well, in the end, May was never detected. After all, Renz and Emmeline hogged the spotlight too much. Even Mark would not expect that Renz would betray their leader at this time. While Mark and May continued to walk, Mark answered May's question, telling her what Felix had introduced himself and his group, together with the summary of things that he and Felix talked about. Then, Gerger let them go because of that? May asked. I did. Mark shrugged. Maybe we can conduct some business with them in the future. But didn't Gerger threaten to kill that woman? Will they do business with us? May assumed. There's that possibility, but it's unlikely. That Felix reeked the smell of a businessman. I doubt that he would put private matters and business all together. Besides, it's not like he's the only member of their group, right? At Mark's words, May nodded. If Felix did not want to conduct business, then find another available agent. Now that they knew about the existence of this organization, it was not impossible to find their other members. Mark and May talked along the way. The two did not mind the bloody scene they were passing through, with bodies of rebels scattered here and there. It did not take long and two little girls bumped into Mark and May. Of course, it was Miracle and Abigail, contesting who would get the first hug. Of course, Abigail won by a large margin. Iola and Amika also followed after the two with troubled faces as they chased the two younger ones. The factory area was at the centralmost part of this base and was accessible through different directions. Thus, it was not surprising that the group that secured the male workers arrived fast. Of course, the male workers were pale after seeing the current state of the factory area. The central space and the walls of the surrounding buildings were scorched. Dismembered bodies lay here and there. Dead bodies pinned by melting icicles could be seen embedded on the walls and the ground. And the nauseating smell of a slaughterhouse was too thick. Some men, especially younger ones, felt their stomachs churning. Fortunately, they knew not to waste the food they ate for lunch. Or else, a lot of them would have stopped to start a vomiting spree. The women inside the warehouse were keeping silent as Mark told them to. After all, they wanted to live. Furthermore, what happened in the factory area was more than enough to make them all huddled in the furthest corner of the warehouse and not make any sound in fear. But then, silence already enveloped the place. They did not know what happened, but none of them were courageous enough to check. It was until some noises were heard outside. It was the sounds of men talking. One of the women recognized one of the voices and by reflex, stood up and ran to the door. That was when that woman saw her husband that she had not seen for a month. As the emotions overflowed, she ran out, not noticing the carnage in the surroundings. And there, the husband and wife embraced each other, under the eyes of the cheering gallery. The other men started teasing the man, making him and his wife red. Nonetheless, it was a happy occasion as the other women caught up to what was happening and reunited with their loved ones. Unfortunately, it was not a happy event for everyone. Some women watched the others with sad faces and heavy hearts. After all, while the women were securely kept in the base, a lot of the men were not. Those men that were not here were drafted into the ranks of the rebels and were sent into outposts all around the island. It was highly possible that many of them had already died. After all, the encounters between the military and the rebels were not just a few times. The soldiers also had no control over who would die and who would live on the battlefield. Then, what about the children? Many of the families captured had children with them. However, not a single child was in the rebel base at all. No one knew where they were, or if they were already dead. As such, some of the married couples that reunited felt their happiness short-lived. Even from the information that Mark received from the military, there was no mention about the children at all. Did forgot to capture some rebels and interrogate them? There was only one rebel remaining, and it was one of the guards in the warehouse that Mark spared. However, it was questionable if he had any information about it. Besides, it was not like Mark cared about the children he never knew. Hey! Rejoining with the group, Pephile called out to Mark. A question came up earlier. What question? Mark asked back, making Pephile point at the workers they rescued. About them. Why did you save these people? That's too uncharacteristic of you. After being asked about it, Pephile decided to pass on the question. It was not surprising that Pephile was curious. Knowing Mark for a while, he knew that Mark was not the type of person that would do charitable work, especially saving people without reason. Gathering people to recruit to the base? Not possible either. After this, their next stop was Pephile's homeland. There was absolutely no way that they would be able to transport these many people. Even with Barak's summoned creatures, these people were just too many. I'll tell you later, all right? Mark shrugged. By the way, how's the performance of those two? Mark then turned towards Padua and Geronimo, who were watching the workers with melancholic eyes. They did fine, but that Geronimo needs some work. He hesitated to fire his gun several times. Luckily, there's Padua to support him. He's too soft. That's why I put them in your side, Mark replied. Given that the two were honest soldiers, the sight of the massacre that Mark did would not suit them in short term. That was why he sent them with Pephile to rescue the male workers in the farming area. Since they needed to protect the victims, they would be forced to fire their guns and kill. Once they got used to that, it would not be late to send them to bloodier missions. Can you call those two? Mark told Pephile. I'll need them to convey our next moves to these people. No problem. Pephile nodded and called for the two young soldiers. Even though they were young, Geronimo and Pephile still had the aura of a military soldier. It was easier for them to control the situation among the workers and make them listen to their next plans. After these people were rescued, Mark made these people choose where they wanted to go. There were two options. One was the military settlement to the southeast, while the other was the other two factions of the rebels to the north. Of course, by the guise of being rescued by the neutral faction, Mark told them what happened to the men that were sent on the suicide mission last night. And as Mark had planned, the people were separated into two groups. In the middle of the announcement, Barak, on the back of the Thunderbird, Trua, landed to the shock of the rescued workers. Even Emihan appeared soon after, as well as Edsel and Pearl, riding on one of Barak's summons. These four were not idling about but were sent by Mark to monitor the situation in the surroundings while the commotion in the rebel base was happening. With the four of them returning almost at the same time, it meant a bad thing. Boss, the animals from the mountains to the north are on the move. Barak reported. It was the same in our area. Pearl detected some strong vibrations. Edsel and Pearl, who came from the eastern side, reported their findings. Mine's the same, said Emihan that monitored the southern area. Without a doubt, the animals in the surrounding mountains were disturbed because of what happened here, especially that explosion from the rockets that Renz's men fired. Not to mention the currently thick smell of blood lingering in the surroundings. You too, Mark called out to Geronimo and Padua. Tell them to gather everything they can find. Weapons, food, water, anything necessary. Fast. Don't forget to tell them that the animals from the mountains are going to attack if they did not hurry. The two nodded and conveyed the order to the workers. Hearing that the evolved animals would be attacking soon, the workers were horrified. Without hesitation, they all started running to retrieve everything they could. On the other hand, Mark and May ransacked the armory of the rebels while the others kept an eye on the surroundings of the base from the top of the walls. Soon, the animals appeared from the foot of the mountains. The number was not really that large. In fact, Mark did not consider them as a threat at all. Nonetheless, because of the existence of these animals, the workers moved without question, as fast as possible. It did not take long and two groups of people left the base, with the larger group going southwest, and a smaller group going north. For this part of his plan, Mark decided to go with the group going to the military settlement. As such, he let out a slight smile behind his mask as he watched his sister go with the other group. Day 148 to 3:24 p.m. Crystallis Noticia Cetus Hideout, Cotonduanas Military Settlement, Codon, San Andres, Cotonduanas. Excusing herself from her duties, Vanessa left General Padilla's side. As she was a hard-working individual that barely took breaks from her duties, she was allowed to leave without question. It was not like Vanessa wanted to go. However, she received a message from Roach using his little underlings. This settlement was run by the military. However, it was unknown to everyone. There was a house here being used by a secret organization as a hideout. No one suspected it as the home was listed to a mutator in his group. And by the records, that mutator was Vanessa's brother. That was why no one would find it strange that Vanessa would appear here from time to time. The organization was called Crystallis Noticia Cetus, a worldwide secret organization with a similar structure to Ouroboros. Its members were not only humans but also beings that lurked in the darkness of modern society. However, while being similarly structured, Crystallis Noticia Cetus or CNC was far too different from Ouroboros. The latter was more or less considered as a terrorist group. The former was more of a black market organization. As long as it could be sold, the CNC had them. From information, illegal firearms, drugs, and even human slaves, they had it. For the people of the dark side, they might also sell magical treasures and even non-human slaves. Another difference between CNC and Ouroboros was that CNC had no fixed base for the whole organization. They had businesses and hideouts around the globe. However, no place could be considered the organization's central area of operations. Instead, all members could manage their own businesses. They could also group up and conduct business in their own ways. The only thing that put the whole organization together was their leader. No one knew who or what the leader was. However, whenever a new member passed the organization's trials, he would appear like a phantom wearing a mask to give them a mark and a unique way of communication with other members. The only times that the members of CNC gathering on a large scale were when a commissioned mission occurred or when the yearly black market was happening. Vanessa arrived at the hideout. It was located in the easternmost area of the settlement. She knocked at the door in an inconspicuous but rhythmic manner, and the door was opened by Roach. Without a word, Vanessa entered. Roach then closed the door after securing that no one followed her. The hideout was not too spacious. It was just a bungalow with 3 small rooms, a kitchen, a toilet, and a living room. As Vanessa entered the living room, she was greeted by a woman who bowed to her with respect. With a collar on her neck with the symbol of the organization, she was definitely a slave. She was in charge of the house chores while the members of the organization were doing their job. "Elena, you can go back to your work," Vanessa said to the maid. Without a word, Elena nodded and walked to the kitchen. There was a smell of meat being boiled. It was likely that she was in the middle of cooking. Vanessa turned back at Roach with a look asking him where. In reply, the man pointed to the innermost room in the house. Usually, there was only Roach and Elena in this place, because Roach was in charge of communications and, from time to time, scouting and tailing people. He would not have much to do and would only stay home. Then, of course, Elena, who could not leave the house without permission. Now, however, 2 people were here in an untimely manner. Vanessa opened the door and entered. There, the young-looking Felix was sitting on a chair without care. On the bed, an unconscious woman was lying down. "Yo." Felix waved with a smile. Seeing that behavior, Vanessa could only shrug. Out of all the members of their group on this island, Felix was the oldest. And yet, he was the most childish. "Is the message Roach sent me real?" Vanessa asked as she turned to the unconscious woman, who was without a doubt, Emmeline. Is the faction you looked after already gone? What happened? Hey, that courier got us. Felix shrugged with a smile. Courier? Vanessa was confused. Did you forget already? That guy you told Roach to tail? Felix replied and turned to Roach. What's his name again? Mark. Roach replied. Yeah, that guy. Felix nodded. I didn't forget, all right. Vanessa said in annoyance. I just don't understand why he would do that. Are you sure that it's him? He's wearing a mask and a full body armor, but you know my eyes. Felix pointed at his eye. Even if one put on a disguise, as long as I saw them before, it would be hard for me not to recognize them. Vanessa could not retort to that. I talked a bit with him, and he said that our men did something to offend him. Gravely if I say, since he just went on killing without saying anything. Probably, the only people left alive at the base now are those people that were captured for labor. Felix added. So, your men offended him. Roach chimed in. Is it possible that it's connected to what happened this morning? What happened? Felix asked. There, Roach and Vanessa exchanged information with Felix after moving to the living room. In a few minutes, the three had full knowledge of what transpired on both sides. So, from the information we had so far, it is possible that the rebels ended up killing his family after being driven away by that soldier. Vanessa surmised. What do you think? Roach asked Felix. It's really possible. Felix nodded. Those bastards of Wrens had been doing things behind our backs. I shouldn't have turned a blind eye to them if I knew this would happen. But then, Felix added. That's if he's saying the truth when he said that his family members are all dead. It's also possible that he's lying to conceal the truth. Since that could also happen, Vanessa and Roach could only nod. However, it was hard to determine the truth. The clues were too vague. Furthermore, Mark's actions were erratic and hard to predict. Moreover, even though Felix already mentioned their organization, Mark still showed hostility and threatened to kill. Was it worth it to go against a worldwide organization if it was only for mere deception? The more the three mulled over the topic, the harder it became to gauge Mark's intentions. What was the truth, and which was the lie? If Mark was really deceiving everyone, he made it hard to discern. Should we investigate it? Roach asked. Investigate for what? Felix asked. It's not like anyone was paying us to investigate it. Besides, I better not get the ire a monster like that more than this. Just talking to him while he's not concealing his killing intent makes it hard for me to smile. You don't want to get back at him? Roach asked back. He just destroyed years of your effort. You even paid us this year to gather here and put the whole island in observation. Well, I didn't really lose anything. Felix laughed. I only supplied the rebels the roots, and the money came from their funds. Furthermore, I got commissioned from that since I'm the agent for both sides. That's where I got what I paid you guys. The years of effort didn't go to waste too. A melon had grown far more powerful than most people on Earth. The only thing left is to let her get her revenge. After that, we can leave. I guess that's true. Vanessa and Roach agreed. However, we can't do that right now, can we? Vanessa then added. And to that, the other two can only agree. Their organization had various missions that they were paid for. On this island, they had two missions to fulfill. One was the mission that Felix paid for. The other was to keep the power balance in this place until a specific point in time. And who paid for that? It was no other than the political faction in this settlement. To be specific, the political family, the Marcos. Their family had ties everywhere, and it was not news to them about the existence of several secret organizations in the world. In fact, they had connections to some, and CNC was not an exception. The political faction was growing their influence behind the military's back. However, before the political faction could gain enough power, the military should not fall. If that happened, the political faction would not have enough ability to protect the settlement. By the looks of it, the political faction wanted to take over the island soon. Until they managed to reach their goal, Emmeline's revenge could not be done. After all, Emmeline's main target for her revenge was an important figure in this settlement, and due to an unexpected event, the two missions unexpectedly overlapped. Thus, before they could finish the mission Felix paid for, they needed to wait. The three continued to discuss things since Vanessa still had time before returning. Elena even served them some coffee while they talked. It would not be too long, and the fall of the anti-government faction of the rebels would reach the military. The power struggle already tilted to the military's side, and they would need to do something about this soon. But then, in the middle of the discussion, Roach froze. "What's wrong?" Felix asked. "I lost connection to one of my familiars," Roach replied, turning to Felix. "It's one of those we sent to the outposts. The outpost might have been attacked, and my familiar died for some reason." "It might be that courier and his group," Vanessa mulled. "It looks like they really have the intention of removing the rebels from this island. They might be only aiming for our faction, though," Felix said, which made Vanessa retract some of her words. "Which outpost was it?" Felix then turned to Roach. "Should be the one south of your main base," Roach replied with his eyes closed. "The others are still fine." "Is it possible that they found out about your familiars?" Vanessa voiced out her assumption. However, Roach could not reply. There were a lot of possibilities to conclude a specific one. "Let me send another one," Roach decided as he let out a short and soft whisper like screech. Then, from the gap in the ceiling, a fist-sized cockroach climbed down the walls. Roach then sent out a few more screeches, and the cockroach rushed out of the house through another gap in the wall. "Seriously, I can't really get used to this ability of yours," Vanessa complained. Around the world, although it was very rare, some people were born with the ability to discern and understand sounds and noises from certain kinds of animals and insects. These people were called whisperers. Roach was one of those people, and he was able to understand and command no other than different kinds of cockroaches. Thus, he got his current alias. It was the method they used to communicate throughout the island and the thing Roach used to tell some people. Of course, Roach would come himself if what they needed to follow was important people. Soon, Vanessa's break time was finished, and she returned to work. It could not be helped if they wanted to maintain her image in this settlement. As such, Felix continued to nurse Emmeline while Roach waited for the familiar he sent just earlier. But then, Roach was struck with surprise. About 2 hours later from the time he sent it, he lost connection with his familiar once more. Felix had just gone out of the room and saw Roach's frown. "What is it now?" Felix asked. Roach turned to Felix with a click of his tongue. "This might be bad. It looks like Mark's group can distinguish my familiars. I just lost connection with the one I sent earlier. Maybe the first one was not a coincidence either." Day 148 to 4:59 p.m. Catanduanes Circumferential Road, Barangay Kilakilahan, Municipality of San Miguel, Catanduanes. Splat. Foul-smelling blood and innards splattered as Mark threw a fist-sized rock at his target. The rock left an indent on the trunk of a tree before it fell, revealing the squashed insect that stuck on the tree. Mark frowned as he glanced at the flattened cockroach and the disgusting splatter of white liquid, a mixture of its blood and innards, around it. "This is the second time," May murmured beside Mark. Leaving the rebel base empty with nothing but bloody corpses, it would not take long for the whole place to crumble. The animals that went down the mountain were quite smart and aware of dangers. Instead of going towards the group of people leaving the base, they invaded the empty base instead. Compared to moving prey capable of fighting back, these evolved animals preferred the fresh food already served in a platter. It was like what was happening around Mark's base. Animals that recognized the danger would stay away. Right now, both groups that left the rebel base were accompanied by powerful beings. Of course, these intelligent animals would try to avoid them. While the smaller group went north, Mark led the larger group of people going to the south. Together with him was no other than the May, the 4 girls, Shaflar, and Amihan. The others were all assigned to escort the smaller group. Mark even sent Crimson and Ignis to follow the group in the dark. Of course, not only to guard the group but also to monitor Barak and the 2 young soldiers. The three were just new members of the group. Furthermore, Barak was different from everyone since he did not voluntarily join the group. Mark brought him by force and threats. Well, it was not like Barak showed any sign of escaping. By what it looked like, his interest was also piqued by Mark's group. Nonetheless, it was better to be cautious. The travel was not fast. If Mark was to judge it, it was even slower than normal. It was not surprising since the people they were escorting were either fatigued or undernourished. The only good thing was that they were in higher spirits. After all, they had just been freed from the suffocating grasp of the rebels. Their slow journey along the Katandwana's circumferential road was not smooth either, otherwise. From time to time, they would encounter feral evolved animals or those with inferior intelligence. Without surprise, the feral ones attacked on sight. On the other hand, even with their lacking intelligence, the latter kind of evolved animals were quite tricky to deal with. After all, animals had their own methods of hunting. One tricky encounter they had was when they were spotted by a group of evolved dogs after more than 2 hours of walking. It was clear that these dogs were domesticated ones before the outbreak. Some even had characteristics of expensive breeds of dogs. Unfortunately, the lack of human interaction and hunger pushed them back to being wild. Not to mention the effects of mutagen on most animals, turning them more aggressive than before. Being animals with natural hunting instincts, the dogs did not attack openly but tried to surround the group like how wolves behaved. With more than 150 dogs, it was quite a large pack that could overwhelm the 100 people on Mark's side. Not to mention that the actual people capable of fighting in the workers' group were less than half even with guns. Well, it was a mistake for these wild dogs to not put Chaflar and Mark in their sights. They might have thought that they could sneak out 1 or 2 humans for a late afternoon lunch. Unfortunately, the dogs did not even become a challenge as their leader, the alpha of the pack, was instantly picked by Mark and killed. With their leader gone, the chain of command among the dogs was broken immediately, and it became easier to eliminate them all with the help of the workers. That, however, brought another threat to the group. After all, the area where the dogs attacked was near an outpost of the aggressive rebels. Furthermore, it seemed that they were restless after losing contact with the main base and immediately went out in groups to check the gunfire. They were unlucky, however. Mark could monitor their movements using their mental fluctuations. At the moment they saw Mark's group, May's sniper rifle already pierced bullets onto their heads. The only ones left were those that appeared to be having similar mental fluctuations to some of the workers they managed to rescue. Without a doubt, they were the men that were forced into the ranks of the rebels. Mark then shouted at the base during the encounter, telling what happened to the rebel base. After those men realized that the people in Mark's group were the very same workers from the main base, they began to turn against the rebels that pushed them into the job they never wanted. In the end, some of the men were relatives of the workers that Mark's group was escorting, while a few were among the group that went north. It was a half-hour stop as they eliminated the rebels in that outpost. They also took everything they could. Food, water, weapons, ammunition, and even some explosives. They took it all. The explosives would be proven useful along the way since before reaching the military base, they would pass by the vicinity of the most populous land area on the island of Katandwanas, the municipality of Virak. While gathering the supplies, however, Mark noticed something odd. Mark noticed something emitting a mental fluctuation not too different from a well-trained military dog but did not feel like one. It was coming from the highest watchtower of the outpost. Strange enough, Mark did not see any large creature. It became even stranger when Mark saw a fist-sized cockroach hanging out on the wall of the watchtower. When Mark approached it, it tried to flee. The way it fled, however, appeared to be imitating the natural behavior of a regular cockroach. It was even if it was not. Mark could not shake off the odd feeling. Thus, when the cockroach flew away towards the forest, he shot with a bolt of black lightning. It instantly turned into a crispy fried insect that fell to the ground. That was only when the odd feeling vanished. In the first place, it was clearly an intelligent insect. Yet, instead of fleeing the area as most animals and insects did because of Mark's and Chaflar's presence, it stayed there instead. It was as if it was watching the outpost, and it only tried to escape when it was found out. Then, as they continued onto the road, they encountered another one of these cockroaches. The behavior of this one was even stranger. Mark detected it immediately when it entered his detection area. He could tell that it was moving across the forest by the roadside at fast speeds. But then, when it seemed that it spotted Mark's group, it stopped. It began climbing a trunk of the tree nearby and behaved like an insect that it was supposed to be. Without a doubt, it was suspicious. Mark even felt that odd feeling once more. When Mark felt it the second time, he could not help but realize what this feeling was. It was similar to the sensation when a surveillance camera was pointed at you while shopping inside a store. That uncomfortable feeling of being watched beyond the lens of a tool. Thus, Mark suspected that these cockroaches might be sent by someone as a surveillance tool. That was why Mark killed it as soon as he could, throwing a rock that he had just picked up to kill it. Asterisk asterisk. Looks like there's someone capable of controlling these cockroaches for surveillance. Mark said to May, taking his eyes away from the disgusting scene of a splattered fist-sized cockroach. That group? May assumed. Probably. Mark agreed. So far, aside from the spirits and elementals on the northwest and the demons to the southeast, that group are the only possibility. We can also rule out the elementals since they won't have any reason to do this. May agreed with Mark's assumptions. While being cautious of the surroundings, they continued for another hour of traveling. They passed by a few more small villages. Of course, each was empty with nothing else but wild animals. But what was worrying for the workers was the sight of infected that they started to encounter as they moved further south. It was not that surprising, in fact. The military managed to destroy the only place where the infected managed to congregate on the island. It was no other than the municipality of Virakto, the south of the island of Katandwanas. As it had its own airport, it was expected to be one of the ground zeros where infected-filled airplanes crashed during the start of the apocalypse. One of those airplanes crashed in Virak, which started the spread of the infected on the island. Fortunately, it was not at a degree comparable to NAIA or other areas. The military managed to destroy it, eliminating the immediate threat of the infected to the island. Of course, it did not mean that they managed to kill all of the infected. Despite their records and what the military declared, there were still some stray infected here and there. It was a very rare encounter, to be honest, as the surrounding mountains and forests were areas hard to be traversed by the infected. Furthermore, they were also targeted by the evolved animals for food. That was why it was very rare to see one in the middle of the island. About past 5 in the afternoon, they arrived at the barangay of Bodan in the municipality of San Miguel. It was a small barangay with the Katandwanas circumferential road going through its center. At this point, Mark started to look for places where they could spend the night. It was getting late, after all. There was no way they would travel in this large group of people on foot during the night. Furthermore, the workers were getting tired. Unlike Mark's actual group, these people were far weaker. Unfortunately, the small barangay of Bodan could not offer them a good place to stay. It did have a lot of houses. However, all of them were small. Even worse, only a few were made of concrete, while the majority of the homes were still built with patchy construction materials. It was not a secure place to stay for the night. Luckily, continuing past barangay Bodan, they arrived at the area where government structures and facilities were built before the outbreak. In fact, some were still under construction and will never be finished in the near future. Here, a suitable place was chosen by Mark. It was the healthcare office of the municipality of San Miguel. In simpler words, the municipal hospital. Surely, it was not a clean place, given that hospitals became the centers of infection during the outbreak. But with the infected mostly eliminated from the island, it was empty. Of course, the horrors that happened inside its walls still left their marks with blood splatters and a disgusting stench. Nonetheless, it was a big, secure place for everyone to spend the night. Fortunately, Amihan was here to help blow out the musty and disgusting smell in the building, and the workers helped with cleaning on places where they would sleep. They also had to dump out the hospital beds. However, no one would want to sleep in those. After all, considering that the disgusting smell seeped into the dusty mattresses. Inside, Mark also found some decayed bodies. Luckily, there were just a few, and by the looks of it, eaten by animals. It was easy to dispose of the bodies with a few bursts of black flames. Securing the place, this place seemed to be a good one. The only thing they needed to do next was to cook dinner and go to sleep. Unfortunately, Mark could only shake his head at sundown. It looked like the night would be far from peaceful, after all. Day 148 to 8:15 p.m. San Miguel Municipal Health Office, Quirino Highway, District 2, Municipality of San Miguel, Catanduanes. The healthcare office of the Municipality of San Miguel was not a large one. The entire area only occupied about 900 square meters of land, with two medium-sized buildings being the entirety of the compound. The first building facing the road was a single-floor one that served as an office and clinic for minor health issues. It was the second building at the back that had the other facilities and the hospital ward. And, of course, it was the second building that Mark's group and the workers occupied. For safety, the workers were to use the second floor while Mark's group would take the first floor. Knowing the possible dangers, the workers agreed. Of course, they also wanted to be of help, being the ones saved by Mark and the others. However, as they already saw the prowess of Mark's group along the way, they could not deny the fact that they would be more of baggage than help. As such, the workers only did what they could do, and that was to focus on cleaning and, later on, cooking food for dinner. With the beds thrown out, everyone would sleep on the floor. The workers laid down the blankets they managed to bring from the rebel base. They even offered Mark's group some blankets, but the latter declined for some reason they did not know. Since Mark's group had children with them, the workers wanted to insist on giving the blankets. However, they did not do so. Unknown to them, they subconsciously developed a servile attitude toward those with power. They questioned things less in fear of being punished or receiving the ire of someone superior. It was a negative side effect from being captured and forced to work. All the while, the workers feared for the lives of their loved ones. Thus, even when they were worried about where the children would sleep, they just went off without questioning why Mark declined. Well, unknown to them, Mark had better bedding options for his family. He did not want those blankets not washed for who knows how long. While the cleaning was ongoing, those tasked with food were also doing their work. The workers did not dare claim ownership of the food that they managed to collect from the rebel base. As such, they were already expecting something like watered-down porridge for dinner. It was their usual food while living in the rebel base. It was also the reason for being undernourished. If not for mutagen's positive effects on the human body, things might have been worse. The workers were surprised, however. Mark allowed the cooks to use the sacks of rice and canned goods for cooking. He even prepared large slices of octopus meat. Although they were confused as to where the fresh-looking octopus meat came from in the middle of the mountains, everyone was looking forward to a sumptuous dinner. Cooking for this large number of people was taxing for the cooks. Nonetheless, looking at the food they were cooking, they did not feel tired at all. None of them could remember when was the last time they were able to eat a fulfilling amount of food for a meal. That thought alone made the cooks do their best. The sun finally set, and the workers on the second floor gathered to eat meals, used cooking oil lamps and lit up the rooms, and everyone feasted on the best food they had for months. Mark's group, on the other hand, stayed on the first floor for dinner. While Mark preferred this arrangement, it was not the main reason. It would be more comfortable for the workers to eat together. While Mark's group were their saviors, they were still unfamiliar people. Furthermore, Mark did not want to get too familiar with the workers for reasons more than one. The food was delicious for the workers. However, for some, instead of becoming happy, they felt sadder. While looking at their food, they could not help but remember their children. Were they still alive? If they were they eating good food like this? Those kinds of questions entered the minds of the lonely parents. Soon, all the food was gone, and everyone's stomach was satisfied. After the workers sat down and chatted, letting their stomach digest the food for a bit, everyone should go to sleep. They would have an early day tomorrow, and by what Mark deduced, They might arrive at the military settlement during the afternoon. Mark's group was the same. They took a small room near the emergency room for a place to sleep. As it was now time to rest, Mark instructed everyone to turn off the lights. Of course, it would be inconvenient to be in the dark. However, keeping the lights on was more dangerous than turning it off. If the lights were left on, not only would it waste fuel, but it would draw attention to the hospital. The surroundings outside were extremely dark, after all. Many dangerous things would be attracted to the light. Gigantic insects were only the least of it. It might also draw the attention of the remaining rebels if there were some to lurk nearby. Soon, the municipal hospital was dark and dead silent. But of course, not all the workers were asleep. Some volunteered to take shifts and guard near the stairs of the second floor. It did not take long for almost everyone to fall asleep. For the first time, the workers managed to sleep freely without fear of what the rebels could do to them in the future. As for Mark's group, everyone was tired. The several kilometers journey after fighting a bunch of rebels definitely took a toll on them. The girls did not even insist on playing before sleeping and just laid down on their beds saying good night. Like usual, Mark was not entirely asleep. He was watching over May and the girls as they sleep beside him. Sleeping together in a few soft and clean mattresses lined up together was not bad. However, Mark could not help but feel a bit glad that Amika was sleeping near the wall and kicking it instead of other things. But then, 2 hours after everyone slept, Mark was stricken by an odd feeling. Mark could not help but look around. May was asleep hugging him, and the girls were also sleeping. Amihan was still there on her pillow above a table. Closing his eyes, Mark felt that the workers were still in the same positions aside from the volunteers that already changed shifts. Chaflar was also outside where the parking area for ambulances and was deeply asleep. Nothing was odd, but Mark could not help but get overwhelmed by the strange feeling. As such, Mark slowly moved May away, taking care that she would not wake up. He then walked out of the room. Mark did not stop until he reached the emergency door and went out. After looking around, everything still appeared normal, but the odd feeling could not be shaken off. Mark bent his knees and took 2 jumps to reach the roof of the hospital building. The elevation of the 2 hospital buildings of the municipal hospital was different. This made it easier to reach the roof of the second one by jumping onto the roof of the smaller building. However, even from the roof, everything looked normal. Yes, it was dark. Nonetheless, that was how it was supposed to be in the middle of the mountains during the apocalypse. Mark continued to observe the surroundings. However, instead of lessening, the odd feeling continued to grow stronger. It was until, "Papa," Mark heard Abigail calling him. "So, this is why, huh?" Mark frowned. Abigail continued to call unto him as if asking for help. However, Mark could clearly feel that Abigail was sound asleep inside their room. Furthermore, the voice was coming from the southeast, the area behind the hospital facing the river. And as the voice wanted, Mark walked toward it. However, Mark did not forget to wake up Chaflar and told the dragon to keep a lookout. Soon, Mark stood in the middle of the muddy rice fields by the riverside. Of course, the whole place was devoid of rice and was filled with tall wild grass instead. That was when the call stopped. "It seems like you noticed I'm not hypnotized, huh?" Mark smiled. "Come out." Mark was feeling uncomfortable. By instinct, he could feel that someone or something was lurking around. After all, he could feel the predatory thirst that could also be felt from feral animals and highly mutated infected. However, Mark could not sense anything from his empathic detection. However, it seemed that his shouting triggered the enemies into showing themselves. One by one, mounds of mud in the rice fields appeared. Bursting out of them were small humanoid figures. Mark could not help but frown even deeper. The enemies were covered with mud and there were about 200 of them. But one thing that Mark could tell, they were not infected. And yet, Mark could not sense any emotional fluctuation from any of them. Moreover, by how they were hunched, growling at Mark like beasts, these enemies might not have a mind of their own. And the worst thing above all, the enemies around Mark were all children. It was not hard to assume things. After all, where would one see a whole bunch of children on this island? From what Mark knew, there was only one event that could lead to this. Kurya. A loud screech-like cry sounded out from somewhere in the rice field. With that cry, the children began moving. Some dove into the mud once more while the others started running. In a few seconds, Mark could not see any of them. The only thing that made him sure that he was still surrounded were the sounds of squelching mud and rustling grass. From what it appeared, each child was moving as fast as a cheetah while running across the grass-filled rice field. Running in different directions, they were trying to disorient their prey. Swoosh! Mark then heard some fast movements behind him. Immediately as the sound was heard, Mark turned around. What he saw was a mud-covered naked little girl already midair leaping at him. Mark then moved. Stepping sideways, Mark dodged the girl's claws that passed an inch away from his neck. He then grabbed the girl's wrists with his left hand and grabbed her neck before pinning her to the ground. Screech! Screech! The girl screeched loudly and flailed violently. However, this girl that appeared to be 5 years old had no way of getting away from the grasp of Mark. Finally, Mark managed to get a clear look at the assailant. Mark could not help but feel pity. The girl was extremely thin. Even though Mark held her on her wrists and neck, it felt like he was only holding at a skeleton. However, that was not the only thing. She had yellowish-green pupils that could reflect light like animals. Her teeth were extremely sharp like a piranha. And her nails were like the claws of a cat. Suddenly, memories of the deity of bloodshed and even the elder cultivator whose soul was absorbed by him flashed in front of his eyes. Tisk! Mark clicked his tongue. He finally knew what happened. Swoosh! 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 While Mark pinned the girl to the ground, several more sounds rushed towards Mark. Some came from bursts of mud while the others rushed out from the tall grasses. Suddenly, about 9 more children were already midair, leaping to attack his back. You brats! Mark murmured as both his blood whips and wings appeared from his back. Clang! Clanging sounds echoed as the blood whips that turned metal and Mark's wings blocked the claws of the children attacking him. Screech! The girl on Mark's hands continued to screech and flail while the others were thrown back from the impact of their attacks getting blocked. Conjuring a blood metal cuffs, Mark restrained the arms and legs of the little girl before standing up. Mark looked around. The children were wary of him. Huh. Mark sighed. Just what the hell did the demons in this island do? Those words came out of Mark's mouth. After all, these children surrounding him were no longer humans. From the memories that flashed in Mark's eyes, these children were called feral demons. Day 148 to 11:31 p.m. Ricefield, District 2, Municipality of San Miguel, Catanduanes. Pang! Clang! Bone-like and metallic sounds echoed as Mark parried another 2 children that tried to attack from behind him. Mark observed the movements of the feral demon children. It appeared that their hunting pattern relied on attacking the prey from behind while others did the distraction. And to say, Mark agreed that it was quite an effective hunting method. Furthermore, these children seemed to have numbers along with their speed and movement abilities. It would be hard to fend off these children, even if it was a group of armed people. Not to mention, this was the hunting ground of these children. From the soft mud to the tall grass, they could use it to their advantage. Clang! Clang! Mark received another 2 attacks, which he parried. These guys are quick to adapt. Mark murmured. After Mark easily captured the girl that attacked first, the children never attacked alone. Their coordination with each other was far from perfect, but not a lot of holes to take advantage of. And after every attack that Mark parried, the next attacks would come, allowing the previous ones to flee back either into the mud or behind the tall grass. These children were very well coordinated. The sound of squelching mud and rustling grass continued as the children continued to attack Mark in groups. Just how many were there? Mark could not estimate since he could not detect them. It was like with the infected. In the first place, What kind of creatures were feral demons? Last night, it was explained to Mark. Not just any human could become a spirit or a demon. Compatibility was needed, like some of the members from the mother's side of Mark's family. In this case, blood demons was an special existence that was akin to vampires that could pass on their demonic traits to any human. But of course, only pure bloods retained the highest abilities as a demon. As for disease like demonification, only a select few would turn into a proper demon. Not even all human descendants of Aswangs could inherit their bloodline. However, it did not mean that incompatible humans could not undergo such demonification processes. The very fortunate ones could step into being lesser demons, but the majority in these circumstances failed the process. Those failed demonification produced being called feral demons. Compatibility with such race-changing processes was not only determined by a person's body but mostly by one's soul. While the body was the medium to store and materialize magical energy into existence, the soul held the control and capacity to use that energy. Both things were needed for a person to be able to successfully become either a demon or a spirit. In ordinary humans, however, their souls had almost non-existent control to magical energy. As such, their bodies lacked it. During the demonification process, their bodies would be transformed into the race of demons they were supposed to become. The transformation was not physical but also magical. And to incompatible humans, it was fatal, at least, to their souls. Changing their bodies into demonic forms enabled their bodies to hold and absorb magical energy. However, this process would not change their souls easily. The body would change first, while the soul would slowly change over time. This was one of the causes of mental rejection to people that unwantedly turned into demons. It was because their bodies already changed, albeit still having a human soul. To compatible humans, their souls were able to handle such change in their bodies. Slowly, their souls would be able to control the new kind of energy flowing inside them. But to incompatible people, that was not possible. Since their souls lacked the capability to control magical energies, they would not be able to handle the changes in their bodies. Their souls could be caught up in the turbulent energies they now had and had no way of settling it down. In the end, the chains that connected the body and the soul would be torn. The souls would be whisked out of their bodies, leaving an empty demonic shell. In the worst cases, their souls would be torn apart by the surging demonic energies inside them. And if this happened, the world considered them dead. Their souls were sent to the afterlife, leaving these flesh-eating demons to become a threat to everyone. A demonified empty human husk, that was what feral demons were. Mark parried another 3 attackers, with his eyes showing pity on the children. He would feel such if not for the fact that he was also a father of 3 girls now. What would the parents feel if they saw their children had already turned into something inhuman? Sadness? Remorse? Some of them might even think that the world was not worth living in anymore. Mark suddenly remembered the story of a reincarnated king that fell into a cliff because of bandits. That was such a good story. The death of a child could give despair. However, a child becoming a feral demon might turn out to be worse. The worst thing, this kind of demonification was not reversible. And even if a method to turn them back into human existed, they would not live long. After all, they already lost their souls. The best that might happen was for them to become lifelong comatose patients. What should I do with these brats? Mark asked himself. He mulled over whether he should capture these children and show them to their parents. But in the middle of his thoughts, Mark sensed something. It was very faint, that it was almost non-existent, however, it was there. Clang. Mark crouched as his wings and spider-like limbs blocked another group of attacks. The children were still relentlessly attacking, trying to wear him down. Suddenly, Mark's eyes glowed red, releasing sparks at its corners. As his senses towards emotional energies heightened, he managed to feel it clearly. The lingering emotions of these children before their souls were whisked away from their bodies. Kill us. The despaired thoughts flowed into Mark's subconscious. Clang. Kill us. Clang. Kill us. Mark parried several more, with each of them releasing the same lingering thought in their bodies. Just how much pain did they undergo for all of them to have this kind of lingering emotions? If that's what you brought, wish, Mark said as he drew a sword made of blood metal. 5 children jumped out of the tall grass and mud to attack Mark from behind. Unlike before, however, Mark did not parry the attacks with his wings or metal limbs. Instead, he turned around, swung his sword a couple of times. Shing! 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 Splat! The bodies of 5 children fell to the ground with their heads, limbs, and torsos detached from each other. Wary but not scared, another group attacked from behind Mark, only to suffer the same fate. This went on for another few times before the attacks died down. Of course, it did not mean that Mark already wiped the children out. It was because they started to view Mark as a predator instead of prey. Right now, more than several dozen dismembered bodies of children littered around Mark. Was it brutal? It might have been better if that was the case. Unfortunately, it was not. Dismembering these demon children was not even enough to kill them. Even now, with their dismembered bodies, each part was still squirming like tails of lizards. They were feral demons. Not the infected. Just beheading or destroying their brain was not enough to kill them. The only a few ways to dispose of these feral demons, one was to. Bam! Mark waved both his hands and the area around him was covered with black flames. Burn their squirming bodies to ashes. That sight made the surroundings quiet. Then, a few seconds later, it became noisier. The feral demons finally considered Mark as way above their league and started to flee, scattering in all directions. But as if Mark would let that happen, Mark flapped his wings and soared above the rice field. From above, he could see the movements within the tall grass clearly. At that height, Mark managed to deduce where most of the feral demons were. He then waved his flame-covered hands. The feral demons continued to run away. However, they could only stop in surprise when they reached the border of the rice paddy. It was because, before them, a wall of black flames blocked their escape. Screech! Suddenly, that loud screech was heard once more. So, there you are. Mark smiled as he swooped down into a patch of tall grass. The moment he flew up again, he had a girl flailing on his grasp. About 10 years old, this should be the leader of this pack of feral demons. Her screeches were the ones giving orders towards the others. Now that Mark grasped her neck and she could not let out a single sound, the feral demons below began to move erratically in confusion. Mark could not help but notice the girl. She appeared different from the others. The girl also had sharp teeth but had no sharp claws. Mark did not even bother stopping her flailing since her strength was weaker too. It was probable that she evolved differently as a leader of the pack. In the groups of animals, this kind of differentiation also existed. In any case, Mark captured the leader. Well, I'll let the others have their wish fulfilled, but some of you are coming with me. Mark smiled, tapping the forehead of the girl he caught. Was it not a good opportunity to capture a few? Mark might better try to study these feral demons since there was a large possibility to encounter more in the future, especially when the different dimensions of Earth began to fuse. With the demons freely roaming the Earth at that time, many humans might become feral demons. What about their wish to die? Mark had less care about that. It was true that he granted their wish to die, but it did not mean that he would give it to everyone. In the end, a large part of grass-covered rice fields began to burn with black flames. The loud screeches and roars of the children echoed as the flames slowly turned their bodies to ashes. From those flames, Mark came out with 3 children in tow. One was the girl that was the first to attack him. The second was the leader of the pack. Lastly, a boy about 9 years old. Mark cuffed the 3 tightly and dropped them outside the vicinity of the flames. Since Mark wanted to be sure that no one escaped the flames, he decided to let it burn for a while. And he was right. Some of the children hid under the mud. Unfortunately for them, the mud started to heat up and harden, forcing them out, only to finally be engulfed in flames and turn to ashes. While waiting for the flames to burn the remaining feral demons, Mark decided to give the three he captured what they wanted. And of course, that was to eat. Mark took out a carcass of one of the dogs they encountered this afternoon. He had no plans on eating dog meat, but he could probably give it to other people. Here, it became handy as he began to slice the body of the dog and fed the hungry feral demons. Sure enough, the three were ravenously hungry. The three feral demons ignored their cuffs and dived onto the freshly cut meat in front of them. The three did not care whether their faces were stained with blood or pieces of meat entered their noses. They bit the dog meat and ate like beasts. Watching the three, Mark felt like he had three new pets to tame and train. Well, aside from that, it was better for Mark to start thinking about how he was going to bring these three with them without being seen by the workers. Day 149 to 8:02 a.m. Katandwanas Circumferential Road, Sipi, Municipality of Bato, Katandwanas. 8 in the morning, Mark's group led the workers on the road once more. As usual, the morning in the apocalypse was early. But today, their morning was even earlier. After all, Mark's group and the rescued people still had to travel on the road. They wanted to reach the end of this journey as soon as possible. Even before the sun had risen, the cooks were already working on cooking their breakfast. It was the most important meal of the day, and everyone needed as much energy as they could have to reach their destination. It was not hard for everyone to wake up, though. No one managed to sleep deeply at all among the workers. Last night, Mark intercepted the danger on his own. It might have been catastrophic if Mark did not detect it beforehand and the feral demon children targeted their parents instead. There was no way that these saddened parents would be able to resist the calls of their children. In the worst case, the parents might go berserk due to the mental attack they could receive and end being hard to handle. The workers did not receive any direct damage. However, the screeches that the feral demons created were too loud. It alerted the ones that volunteered to guard and some of those asleep. Those awakened by the screeches ended up waking the others to enable everyone to act if it became an emergency. Fortunately, the workers did not move out without instructions from Mark's group. They patiently waited until they received any order. Well, they received none in the end. Mark dealt with the problem, after all. When Mark returned, some of the workers gathered the courage to ask Mark what happened. Of course, Mark did not tell them the truth and just replied with a short "Monsters." Well, it was not a lie either. Anyone and anything out of the norm could be called a monster, depending on the context. Feral demons were definitely one. The workers did not ask further as Mark went away to meet with May and the girls. In the least, they thought that the danger was dealt with. It was because Mark returned from the direction of the eerie screeches. When it was time to leave this morning, though, the workers could not help but notice the three tightly sealed plastic dressers that were now tied to Chaffler's body. The workers were even more curious when they heard some muffled growls and thumping from inside the dressers. Mark did not bother feeding the curiosity of the workers. It was better to make them imagine things on their own. Luckily, the growls that the three children made sounded more like a beast than a child. It made the workers' thoughts stray away from the truth further. The only one that Mark had to take care of was the leader of the feral demon children. It seemed that the mental attack and the mimicking voice came from her. That was why her improvised shipping crate was also covered with a thin film of miasma to block her powers. For the plastic dressers that Mark used to encase the three children, these piece of storage furniture was not hard to find. It was more affordable for them to buy plastic furniture for storage and other things. That was why Mark managed to find some since this area of Katandwanas was on the lower economic side. Mark just had to trim some parts of the dressers to make it more like a casket that could fit the three children. Of course, the contents of the caskets were not a secret to May and the girls. Still, the reaction of Iola, Abigail, and Miracle towards the children was quite cute. It looked like even the mature Iola was wary that Mark would add another daughter. For them, they did not want more competition. These odd girls. Really. Nonetheless, the three were relieved when Mark cleared their misunderstanding. Furthermore, he said to treat the three feral demons more like exotic pets. It was not a wrong approach since feral demons were more or less feral beasts. Aside from the events last night and the curiosity of the workers, everything else went as usual. They continued following the road south like they did yesterday, leaving the municipality of San Miguel and entering the municipality of Bato. The more they get nearer to their destination, the workers feel more excited. Soon, they will arrive at the military base. All their worries would finally be washed away. Mark could even hear some of them talking. Maybe they could find their family members there. If not, they could ask for help in finding their other family members, especially their children. Mark could only shake his head. Even if the military agreed with that, the chance of finding their children was next to none. Even if they really managed to find any, it would be questionable that they could still call those their children. All the children captured by the rebels might have become feral demons already. Along the way, the workers also began talking about the sea. Being captives for months, none of them had seen the sea for a long while. A lot of the workers were not really farmers but fishermen. The sea was their life, and they longed for it badly. The municipality of Bato was the southeasternmost part of the island of Catanduanes. Its north and west side were surrounded by mountains, while the east and south were all seashores. Furthermore, the Catanduanes circumferential road would travel along the seaside once it turns west to Virac, Catanduanes. While the workers had high spirits, Mark became wary of the surroundings. The workers did not know anything. It was not like they could be blamed for it. Right now, aside from the anti-government rebel territory, the municipality of Bato was the most dangerous part of the island. Even the military was aware of the dangers. However, the military had no concrete explanation of what was happening in this part of the island. They could only dismiss it as unexplainable infected activity and told everyone to proceed with high caution while approaching this area. Mark, however, knew what was going on in this area, and to say, encountering the children last night was not a total coincidence. The municipality of Bato had already fallen to the hands of the demons in this island. It was their territory, and anyone entering it could be subjected to their machinations. Because of the apocalypse, these demons became more active. There were lesser humans to hunt them, and they could always pin the blame on the infected. Of course, they were also having a bit of a problem. It was because there were also lesser humans for them to prey on. That was why soon enough, Gerger, May whispered with a frown. I know. Mark smiled, patting her head. Not only the two. Even Emihan, Shaflar, and the little girls, with the exception of Amika, noticed the eerie feeling in the surroundings. Soon, in the middle of the morning, the road suddenly turned foggy. It made the high spirits of the workers dampen. They could not help but raise their weapons, ready for any battle that could happen. The fog was not too thick. The workers could still see the road in front of them. What made them warier, however, was the fact that Mark's group disappeared behind the mist. Ocular obstruction. Mark spoke. You guys sure are cautious. Mark and May turned to the side. May almost raised her weapon to shoot, but Mark blocked her and shook his head. May could only stand down. It was the same for the girls. From the thickest area of the fog, two figures emerged. One was a handsome man. He had tanned skin, but it just complemented his exotic appearance. This person looked perfectly human at first glance if no one could detect the malicious aura around him. He was also wearing clean clothes. The second one was the complete opposite. It was a thin, emaciated-looking man with a vulgar-looking face. He walked hunched, and his eyes had a piercing stare as if he was looking at your soul. He was also half naked, which was a sight for sore eyes as his bony body looked horrible. Esteemed demons. Your faces are unfamiliar. I assume that you did not know, but you are stepping into the Sylvestres territory. You all must go back. The handsome demon said. Before going back, these humans are ours for taking. Take it as compensation for trespassing in our territory, hee. The ugly demon added. But then, Mark smiled, to the confusion of the two. You two are mistaken. I know that this place is the territory of you demons. Then, The handsome demon tried to speak but got interrupted as Mark continued. And I don't care. Mark took a step forward. We're just passing by. If you two don't want any trouble, you better step to the side. I don't have any business towards you demons, yet. The two demons frowned towards Mark's threatening attitude. Esteemed demons, I don't think that it is a good idea for you to oppose us. The handsome demon warned, but in the least, he was being cautious. The ugly demon, however. Ho! His vulgar eyes fell on May. We will forgive your attitude just now, but you have to leave that woman. You are K. The ugly demon did not finish his creepy laugh. His eyes went wide as his face was already grasped by someone. Bad decision. Mark whispered to the ugly demon's ears. Bam! The ugly demon's body lost balance as Mark smashed his head to the ground without hesitation. With a loud sound, the ground shook. The handsome demon could not help but jump away as a 2-meter-wide crater formed in the middle of the road. And, of course, the ugly demon's body laid there lifelessly with his head smashed to bits and pieces. There was not even a chance for the bastard to scream before his death. Tisk. Mark clicked his tongue while flicking his hand. It was covered with disgusting blood and brain matter. He then conjured black flames on his hand, burning the filthy things away before turning to the remaining demon. You want to end up like him? Mark asked, kicking the headless body towards the handsome demon. The handsome demon frowned. However, it seemed that he was not that concerned about the death of the ugly demon. Please, don't worry. He deserves it for behaving haughtily while being weak himself. The handsome demon replied calmly. However, the territory is still off limits to demons that did not belong to our clan. I request for all of you to go back. I don't care about your rules. Mark shrugged. We are passing by wherever we want. If you want to follow the steps of that guy, then, continue to block our way. The handsome demon frowned. However, he was unsure whether he would be able to block Mark's group at all. He was not even able to react to Mark's movements at all. Mark already had his companion in his grasp before he was able to notice him move. Unfortunately, I can only admit my incompetence this time around, but expect to hear more from our clan. The handsome demon warned as his body was enveloped in thick fog. Then, the fog in the surroundings vanished. Even the dead body of the ugly demon was missing. The only things left were the crater that Mark created and the blood inside it. What happened? The workers noticed the crater that Mark was standing on. Don't worry. There are just a few bugs lurking around, Mark said nonchalantly. Let's continue. Mark's group then continued on the way, forcing the workers to follow suit. Still, they noticed the blackish-red blood on the crater and were sure that it was not just some bugs. Day 149 to 9:03 a.m. Karorian Settlement, Barangay Karorian, Municipality of Bato, Catanduanes. In the middle of the mountains, there was a small village. Although a lot of homes were built with concrete, the structures were small. It was an example of a countryside village in modern times. Now, it was turned into a settlement surrounded by walls made of wood from the forest and scrap building materials. The walls were topped by rolls of barbed wires to stop anyone from climbing it. Unfortunately, the walls were there, and it was not to stop anyone from coming into the settlement but from going out without permission. It was to avoid their livestock from escaping. In terms of defense, these walls would not help a lot. However, there was no need to make this place a man-made fortress. Aside from the southern side of the village, the other sides were surrounded by forest-covered mountains. The whole place was already a nature-made fortress against attackers. This settlement in the mountains of the municipality of Bato was the very place governed by demons. The population of demons on the island of Catanduanes was not that large. It was just around 200 individuals. Before the outbreak, that number was all scattered throughout the island hiding from human sight. Now that they were gathered together, it would not be long for them to stand up against humans. In this settlement, the majority of the demons were either Aswangs or Manananggals. There were also the occasional rarer ones like Sigbans and Andudunos and other demon races here and there. In this place, humans had no rights. They were treated as livestock. The only exceptions were Momkukulams and Mombabarangs were gifted dark abilities akin to demons. Furthermore, these two kinds of witches were held in regard as even demons would have a hard time once they received their ire. In the largest house at the center of the settlement, a cloud of fog floated and entered the building. The cloud of fog then formed a humanoid shape that humbly bowed before a handsome muscular man having his late breakfast on the dining table. That cloud of fog then materialized, showing a handsome-looking demon. He just stood to the side, watching the muscular man eat. And what was the food on the table? It was the limbless and headless torso of a young virgin woman with her stomach slit open while the man used his knife and fork as he feasted on her raw innards. The woman's decapitated head was also served on a plate at the side with her fully preserved expression of horror when the demons cut her alive. The handsome demon patiently waited. It was until the muscular man used his fork to pierce and scoop out the woman's eye and munched on it with a delightful smile. "What is your business here, Mugwor? Shouldn't you be in the north, guarding the border? You should watch out for those pesky spirits and elementals since they had been messing with our people whenever they got a chance." The man's deep muscular voice that could make women bow down echoed into the ears of the handsome demon called Mugwor. "Lord Cease," Mugwor addressed the muscular man. "A seemingly family of unfamiliar demons entered our jurisdiction. They came with a group of about 100 humans. It appeared that they were ushering humans somewhere." "Unfamiliar demons, you say?" Lord Cease used his fork to pluck out the dead woman's kidney with a bloody snap. "What actions did you take?" "As per rules, we blocked their way and told them to go back." Mugwor replied. "Good. We can't just let anyone enter our territory. If the intruders were humans, capture them. But since those humans had demons with them, it is better not to gain their ire too much. We are not the only demon clans in the world. We can't afford a war with other clans right now." "But Lord Cease," Mugwor interjected, "what is it?" "Ogon gave out conditions on his own volition." "That Ogon?" Lord Cease was exasperated. "Where is that bastard now?" "He's dead, Lord Cease," Mugwor replied, making Lord Cease put down his knife and fork down with a frown. "What happened?" Lord Cease sternly asked. "That Ogon might look unsightly and had a rebellious behavior. However, that Aswang still had enough strength to kill more than a dozen armed soldiers with his bare hands." As the Lord finally asked, Mugwor recalled the encounter about an hour ago. Learning about what happened, Lord Cease did not seem to be agitated. Instead, he started to mull over the situation. "So, they said that they were only passing by, and you said that the one who appeared to be the leader killed Ogon in a blink of an eye. Did you determine what kind of demons they were?" Lord Cease asked. "I'm sorry, Lord Cease." Mugwor bowed one more. "They sure have a demonic aura. Even the giant winged lizard with them shared the same. However, it was the first time I encountered such aura." "Demons of unknown race and origin, was it?" Lord Cease nodded. "Keep an eye on them, but don't make any rash movements. They might be high members of other demon clans. We can't afford distractions while we increase our numbers." "As you command, Lord Cease." Mugwor bowed one last time before turning into a cloud of fog that flew out of the building. "Someone, take this away." Hearing what happened made Lord Cease's mood worse. He lost the appetite. As Lord Cease shouted, several women entered the room to start cleaning the table. While the servants cleaned, however, they all had sticky stares towards the dead woman's body. The smell of human flesh and blood definitely stimulated their hunger. Lord Cease left the dining room and entered another room. Standing at the center of the room, he closed his eyes and spoke. "You heard Mugwor, right? What are your thoughts about it?" At first glance, no one was present in the room. But then, at a closer look, there was a man sitting on one of the chairs in the corner of the room. "I'll give you a warning." The man spoke. "Don't mess with those people. Though by how it sounded like, they will come to create trouble later on." "What do you mean, Austin?" Lord Cease turned to the man. "Do you know them?" "Not personally," Austin replied. "Those demons did not belong to any clan. but it did not mean that they are easy pickings. You definitely felt the explosion of magical energy the other day. That came from their leader. Hearing that, Lord Cease frowned deeply. But why would they make trouble with us? Is it because of what Ogon did? No, the threat was said before Ogon offended them. Then why? Don't ask me. Austin shrugged. I'm not them. That's beyond my scope of information gathering. But it's likely that your demons offended them before in some way. The rebel base in Vega got destroyed yesterday. It might have some connection with that. Hearing all those threatening warnings made Lord Cease's mood worsen even more. In any case, you better prepare, Austin suggested. Without saying anything else, Lord Cease walked out of the room, slamming the door closed. Seriously, he always tries to make a calm face, but his actions do otherwise. Austin shrugged. But seriously, what is that courier planning, making a ruckus around the island? With those words, Austin sat comfortably while playing with a fist-sized cockroach on the wall beside him. ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* Katandwanas Circumferential Road, Gwinabaden, Municipality of Bado, Katandwanas. After the encounter with the two demons that blocked their way, everyone had been cautious of their surroundings. However, it was not because they might possibly encounter danger. There was definitely danger around them. Since arriving in the municipality of Bado, there was an eerie aura lingering in the surroundings. Even Emihan kept hiding inside Mark's bag. It was the aura that marked the demon's territory. This aura covered the surroundings with an unexplainable gloomy and uncomfortable atmosphere that even the densest human alive would feel that something was odd. To spirits, this kind of aura was suffocating to some extent. It was the worst for elementals. Fortunately, they were just walking at the border and not at the center of the demon territory. That was why Emihan could still handle it. Emihan, you okay there? Mark whispered behind him. I'm still okay, Master. Emihan replied with less energy than usual. It was better if Emihan stayed inside the bag, as the sight of her would definitely irk the demons in the surroundings. Still, she was suffering. Sylphs were elementals, after all. That was when the idea entered Mark's mind and his eyes fell on May. Mayor, can you carry my bag for a bit? Mark asked May. May tilted her head in confusion. Still, she nodded and took Mark's backpack. The backpack was not heavy. It only contained a few clothes and served as a disguise. Their things were inside their rings, after all. When May wore the backpack, Mark opened the zipper a bit and peeked inside. Feeling better? Mark asked Emihan. I am? How? Emihan was confused and peeked her head out of the bag. Just stay inside. We are still in the demon territory. Mark warned. Okay, Emihan replied as she immediately hid. Mark shrugged, seeing Emihan suddenly energetic again. May also smiled. May was not affected by the aura in the surroundings because of her unique physique. And now that May wore the backpack where Emihan was hiding, the sylph was shielded by the ominous aura. Continuing on the road, the feeling worsened. It was not because they were moving towards the center of the demon territory. In fact, the road they were taking was moving further away from the center. What made them feel wary and jumpy was the things obviously watching everyone from the surroundings. At almost every corner, they could see animals. Not evolved animals but normal-sized ones. Cats, dogs, pigs, and even carabaos and cows. However, all of them were black in color while having red glowing eyes. For the people that grew up on this island, there was no way that they could not recognize these animals even if they did not want to. Aswangs. Those were these creatures. They were demons that prey on humans while being capable of transforming into the aforementioned animals. Gurgur, aren't they being careless? May whispered. Aren't they supposed to be hiding their involvement in this area? Why are they letting themselves seen by us? They probably think that these people behind us are our prisoners. Since we are demons too, they might think that it's fine. That could possibly be why. These demons, after all, did not know that Marx was escorting these people to the military settlement. Once that happened, the existence of these demons would be revealed to the military. Well, it was not like it would be believed immediately. On Schaffler's back, the little girls sat. It was when Amika's eyes locked onto a boar that was looking at her like a tasty treat. The green-haired girl stiffened and suddenly jumped off Schaffler's back before running to Mark and hugging his arm. Scared? Mark teased. I'm not, Amika retorted. But then, her eyes locked into another black animal, giving her goosebumps. Ooh-ah. No fair. Suddenly, someone shouted. It was Miracle, pointing at Amika that was holding her papa's hand. She immediately followed suit and jumped off Schaffler's back. She rushed onto Mark's free hand. Unfortunately, her steps were small and could not properly keep up with the adults. With a sigh, Mark could only pick her up. Not far from behind, the calm Abigail would not take a loss. However, since both Mark's hands were occupied, she took their mama's instead. May could not help but smile. Iola sighed on Schaffler's back. But when May called her, she happily followed suit. The eerie atmosphere was suddenly broken. The workers following behind could not help but look at Mark's group with warm eyes. Some had jealousy, but not in a bad way. As for the demons in the surroundings, there was only one question they wanted to shout while watching Mark's group. Are we a joke to you people? Day 149 to 5:47 p.m., Port Area, Catanduanes Military Settlement, Codon, Municipality of San Andres, Catanduanes. Bang! Bang! Sounds of gunshots from sniper rifles loudly echoed across the port from several soldiers atop the walls. Those shots made two armor-type infected collapse on the beach, never to stand up again. Since the soldiers accurately shot the two through their eyes, it would be shocking if the two armor-type infected managed to survive. General Padilla watched the scene with a sigh. He was here since several infected were spotted emerging from the sea once again. The aftereffects of the massive horde attack the other day had yet to subside. Not all of the infected under the seawater were eliminated. Thus, many would make it to shore from time to time. Fortunately, it was not on a scale that could be considered an emergency. General, the shallow areas of the shore had been scanned, and there's no further infected activity. A soldier reported to the general through the radio. Proceed with the cleanup, but don't stop monitoring the waters. We can't let our soldiers get ambushed by other mutated infected. The general ordered. Yes, General. The soldier from the radio replied. From the general's position, he could see his orders being implemented already. The cleanup was going smoothly. General Padilla thought that he would finally get a breather for today. But then, General, please come to the communication center. General Padilla's radio loudly sounded with the voice of one of the operators in the communication center. The man seemed to be agitated for some reason. What happened? General Padilla immediately responded to the call. We just received a transmission from our outpost in Santo Domingo. A large group of people arrived, claiming that they were prisoners from the anti-government faction of the rebels. What? It was the general's turn to be surprised. I'll be coming immediately. Receiving such news would make anyone surprised. It was even more for the members of the military that were trying to subdue those rebels that enslaved people. How come that the people captured by those rebels suddenly appeared? The first thing that entered their minds was that there could be some sort of trap in this situation. Nonetheless, there was no way that they would be able to ignore it. There was absolutely no excuse to ignore this. The general and his guards immediately made their way towards the communication center. To the side of the general, Vanessa was in deep thought. What is that courier plotting? She murmured. The general and his entourage soon arrived at the communication center and directly communicated with the outpost to confirm the report. Until then, they were skeptical about the situation and the possibility of it being the scheme of the rebels. But when they heard who brought the people from the rebel base, their suspicion died down to the minimum. Nonetheless, they were shocked for another reason as the statements from the captured people were heard. The anti-government faction's base was destroyed. Those words gave them a whole different impact. Whether it was a good thing or bad had yet to register in everyone's minds. After receiving a more detailed report in the communication center, The general immediately organized soldiers to form a convoy. The general himself was going to lead the convoy this time. Since they needed to confirm things, it was better for the general to be present at the location. The involvement of Mark's group bolstered the general's participation even more. Why? It appeared that Mark's group intended to leave immediately after giving the workers to the soldiers in the outpost. Right now, the officer in charge of the outpost was doing his best to make Mark's group stay, at least for the night. *******, Day 149 to 6:12 p.m. Santo Domingo Elementary School, Barangay Santo Domingo, Municipality of Virac, Catanduanes. The sun had already set. The surroundings had been enveloped by the darkness of the night. On the school grounds, emergency tents were pitched, and a lot of people were preparing for dinner. These people were no other than the workers that Mark's group escorted to this place. The Santo Domingo Elementary School. This school was turned into a military outpost even before the military settlement in Codon was built. It was the outpost that held off most of the infected from the most populated areas of Virac. Specifically, San Isidro village, where the ground zero of the outbreak on this island was located. Due to being built earlier before other outposts, it had more facilities. It was enough to consider this place as a settlement of its own. Furthermore, the village the outpost was located in was surrounded by a wide curve of the Pajo River. It had a highly defensible terrain that would make it hard for attackers from the east and north sides. It was unlikely for enemies to come from west and south either. After the infected were removed from the island, the outpost remained. It was not only to guard against possible lingering infected but also against the rebels that could use this route to attack the military settlement in Codon. Well, the last time they encountered rebels in this area was a month ago. Of course, it was because of the mysterious happenings on the southeast side of the island. "Boss, please have some." Several workers approached a group separated from the others. They carried soup and rice with them. Of course, it was Mark's group. They pitched up their own tent further away from other tents. "Just leave it there." Mark pointed at a concrete fence with a wide top. It was wide enough to act as a table for the food. The workers left the food and respectfully left Mark's group. They did not want to bother their saviors too much, knowing how they were quite reclusive. Mark and May then started to eat dinner with the children and Amihan inside their tent. "I can't believe they don't want us to leave, right, Uncle?" Amika grumbled while sipping her soup. "Aside from making Pafile's group for another night, there are no other issues, really," Mark replied. "Though, I also preferred if we can leave immediately." "Then why did Gerger agree?" May asked. "Well, I just thought that this situation can benefit my plans." Mark smiled. "Plans?" Iola asked, joining into the conversation. "I'll tell you all later. It's just we can't be sure who is listening around." Mark answered, which made the girls agree. In this outpost, there were 3 mutators. Mark could detect them but, of course, had no idea what their abilities were. Furthermore, there was no way for him to know who was the evolvers among the soldiers. While the topic about Mark's plans was done, for now, Mark turned to Abigail that was quietly sipping her bowl of soup. It seemed that she really liked food with either fish or meat. She was really like a cat. "Is it good?" Mark asked, and Abigail nodded in response. Well, the cooks were quite experienced in this. Mark then shrugged. He could feel the soldiers in the outpost having a bit of envy towards the workers. Why? It was because the workers refused the food that was about to be cooked and served to them by the military. It was not like the workers were being considerate or anything, but because the fresh meat they had with them had to be consumed first. At first, the soldiers were a bit relieved that they could save supplies. After all, suddenly having more than 100 people to feed would give their current supplies a heavy hit. Now, however, they were a bit envious that the workers were actually eating soup with meat and rice, while the soldiers only had preserved rations and porridge for dinner. Some soldiers even had the thought of extorting the workers. Not all soldiers were good-hearted, after all. However, as everyone was informed that the general would personally come to retrieve these people, the soldiers held back on their thoughts. They did not know the reason why, but it was likely that there were some important people among these refugees. Most likely, Mark's group, which they had been informed of beforehand. A group led by a man with a sinister aura with a beautiful woman and 4 girls by his side. There were also other people missing, but the description fit the current members of Mark's group. There was also the black dragon that was reported with them. As such, no one tried to show some disrespect as the order came from the general himself. Mark sighed, sensing the discontent of some of the soldiers. Humans surely were fickle beings. Laying down on his bed, Mark's group decided to sleep after cleaning up. The utensils they had, however, were picked up by the workers, and they had nothing else to do. And to say, this day was tiresome in its unique way. After the encounter with those 2 demons that blocked their way after entering their territory, nothing else of note happened. The road across the demon territory was smooth sailing, although the aura and the eyes watching them as they travel were uncomfortable. It was as if they were avoiding Mark's group purposely. Well, it was better than having demons block their way every now and then. Nonetheless, the demonic aura was quite heavy that the workers forgot to enjoy the scene of the sea that they had not seen for a long time. They only managed to recover after they arrived at Virak, exiting the scope of the demon's territory. Unexpectedly, Mark sensed the same handsome demon when they left. He did not pay much attention to the demon, though. As for the journey across Virak, it was unpleasant. There were no enemies aside from a few evolved animals. However, the aftermath of the outbreak was open for everyone to see along the way. The military cleaned the infected, but they had no way of actually cleaning what was left of them in this area. Thus, human bones, dried up blood, and what was left of the humans and infected in this place littered the road. It was not even surprising that one could accidentally kick a skull lying in the middle of the road. Buildings were dilapidated, and some were even demolished to an unrecognizable degree. Even traces of fire and explosions were present here and there. It showed the workers the truth of what happened in the apocalypse, and to say, they were still the luckier ones in this situation. They might have been captured by the rebels, deprived of their freedom. Still, they managed to live a life far away from the natural dangers of the current world. They continued on with those thoughts and arrived at this outpost before sundown. In deep thoughts, Mark turned to his right. May was asleep, tightly embracing him like a body pillow. She was also using his arm as a pillow. Mark did not feel uncomfortable in this position, though. Others might feel numb due to their blood flow being constricted, but definitely not him. Unfortunately, Mark could not keep her in this position for too long. There was still another business that was needed to be dealt with even during the night. Soon, in the middle of the night, the general and his entourage arrived. It was too uncharacteristic of the military since it was dangerous to travel during the night. However, it seemed that they put heavy emphasis on this situation. The general immediately asked for the tent that Mark's group was using. However, knowing that they might be resting already, the general decided to be considerate and move the questioning for tomorrow. However, before the general could even turn away, the tent's door opened, with Mark heading out. "Yo, General." Mark waved nonchalantly. His eyes were even half closed. The surroundings froze a bit. What the hell was that greeting? Day 150 to 12:15 a.m. Briefing room, military outpost, Santo Domingo Elementary School, Barangay Santo Domingo, Municipality of Virak, Catanduanes. In the briefing room where a table was arranged at the center of several chairs, the general's current entourage sat with Mark. "Are you sure that you want to talk already? We can wait for tomorrow?" The general asked Mark. "You guys have time to wait, but we don't. If not for your soldiers insisting for us to give a statement, we would have left already." Mark replied. The general had nothing to reply to that. It was true, after all. Unfortunately, there was no way that they would let Mark's group just leave like that. Furthermore, from the statements that they already gathered from the workers, Mark's group decimated the rebels on their own. They needed to confirm the truth from all the parties involved if possible. "Then, I'll ask straight." General Padilla took a breath. "Is the anti-government faction of the rebels already gone?" Gone is not the right word. Mark shook his head. We only killed almost everyone in their base and in an outpost on the way back. Aside from those, the other outposts are still intact. Their faction leader and her right-hand man also escaped. As Mark said that, he glanced at Vanessa that was recording the conversation for documentation. The latter, however, did not establish eye contact and feigned to concentrate on her work. You're not lying, are you? A familiar soldier interjected. He was the officer in charge of this outpost, Lieutenant Ernesto Macapagal. Our forces had been struggling against the rebels for months already. There's no way that a small group like yours would be able to do that. Mark looked at the lieutenant. He did not take the soldier's words with contempt. While the soldier was unable to believe it, he was not rude either and was just stating facts. Well, that was only if Mark's group were just a band of regular people, which they were not. You don't have to believe me. Mark shrugged. But even if you investigate it, you will end up finding the same answer. Lieutenant Macapagal was still unconvinced. However, he decided to finally stay put. It was because the general was already glaring at him. It bolstered the lieutenant's confusion, though. Were the reports really true? However, his beliefs did not tell him to believe what he heard immediately. He was a person that would only trust what he saw and what was logical. And to say, on human standards, it was illogical for a group led by a single man with a beautiful girl and 4 children to take down the several hundred-member rebel group. It was even if Chaffler's participation was to be counted. The firepower of the rebels was not to be trifled with. If Mark was to hear those thoughts, he would agree that the firepower of the rebels was nothing to joke at. After all, he saw it all and even looted their armory clean. Then, the people outside really are the people captured by the rebels. The general said. That's what I said to him before. Mark pointed at the lieutenant. Did you all walk along the circumferential road? It's good that nothing strange happened. We already witnessed your strength, but what was happening in Bato had been mysterious. General Padilla asked. It was clear on his face. He was expecting a bit of information about what was happening in that area. That was right. We hadn't been able to use that road for 2 months already. Those that entered there would vanish without a trace. Even the search and rescue followed the steps of the victims. Eventually, we decided to stop and restrict missions in that area. Lieutenant Macapagal added. In fact, it would have been easier for the military to deal with the rebels. However, the only road they could take was going through Bato, where the mysterious disappearances happened. Thus, things became harder than it was supposed to be. Since you guys will probably hear it from the refugees, I'll say it. Mark nodded. Bato is currently the base of demons on the island. That answer from Mark made the whole room silent. Some of the soldiers looked at Mark as he had a screw loose. Those with higher positions like the genera, however, had serene expressions. Are you trying to fool us? What bullshit? Demons? A soldier on guard behind the general yelled. With that soldier leading the commotion, the other soldiers followed. Most of them spoke negatively of Mark about telling lies and fantasies in a formal and serious meeting. Bam! Silence. That was when the general shouted in exasperation. But General, the same soldier behind the general tried to argue. I said silence, didn't I? General Padilla glared at the soldier, making him meek. I didn't expect your soldiers to be too narrow-minded, General, Mark remarked, with eyes half closed. But it's not your fault. This is just the result of governments manipulating people to believe such things don't exist. At this point, the general stood up from his seat, his eyes panned towards his soldiers. I believe all of you had heard of the special division in the army. The soldiers stared with confusion after hearing the general's words. But General, isn't that just rumors? A soldier asked. It said that it is a division that was dispatched on paranormal incidents, but there are no records of it existing at all. It exists. The general replied. However, their information is only allowed to be accessed by higher-positioned individuals in the military and government. This revelation was unbelievable. However, as it was the general who was saying this, it was hard to refute it. Then, if I said that the special division exists, Then you all should understand why I said it now. The general added. It made the soldiers contemplate. Now that it was the general that was backing up the existence of demons, they started to have second thoughts about their beliefs. Setting the contemplating soldiers aside, General Padilla sat down once more and faced Mark. You're telling the truth, right? General Padilla asked Mark. There's no merit for me to lie here. I said it already. If you guys ask the refugees, they will tell the same. They all saw the Aswangs by the roadside watching us as we passed by. If it was true, then how did you manage to pass by without harm? All the soldiers that passed there vanished without a trace this past 2 months. Lieutenant McCopigal asked. To the question, Mark shrugged. Who knows? Everyone was speechless at Mark's answer. However, he did not appear to be lying. As still don't buy it. The very same soldier that tried to refute Mark earlier spoke. Sergeant Ballesteros. General Padilla turned to the soldier. I mean, if those demons really exist, what would they do to the people that vanished? Sergeant Ballesteros asked agitatedly. The other soldiers were ready to subdue him if he started to move threateningly. But then, in the middle of it all, Mark stood up. What you want is proof, right? Follow me. Without waiting for any reply, Mark walked out of the briefing room. Everyone hurriedly followed. General Padilla was not an exception, and, of course, the sergeant followed too. It became a commotion as all the soldiers in the briefing room followed behind Mark outside. Not all the refugees were asleep, and their attention was now on the events happening. Boss, is something wrong? One guy that was near Mark while passing by gathered the courage to ask. Nothing threatening. Just take some rest. Mark replied, making sure that the people still awake would not follow. Soon, they reached where the vehicles were parked by the roadside outside the school. But Mark was not after the vehicles. He was heading to Chaflar that was not allowed to enter the school premises. Chaflar was awakened by the sudden commotion and saw Mark. The dragon tried to stand up, thinking that Mark was going to bring him somewhere. Just stay down, Mark said, making the dragon stay put. The soldiers were all wary of Chaflar. After all, who had ever seen an actual dragon, even up close? It was when Mark started fiddling with the plastic dressers hanging on Chaflar's body. It did not take long, and Mark was able to take one down. Unexpectedly, Mark placed the plastic dresser that was modified like a huge storage box in front of the soldiers. The soldiers became even more confused. Until. Thump. 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 The plastic dresser started emitting thumping sounds from inside it. Ah. Right. I forgot to feed them. They might be hungry already. Mark suddenly said, making all the soldiers even more confused. Then, Mark opened the plastic dresser, lighting it up with a flashlight. The soldiers were surprised to see what was inside. What the FCK? One soldier jumped towards Mark to attack him. Unfortunately for the soldier, even though Mark only one hand free, the soldier was made to kneel on the ground. What the FCK? Release me, you bastard, what are you doing with the child? The soldier flailed his body, but Mark's grasp on both his hands behind him was too strong for him to break free. Are you dumb? Mark frowned. Take a look first, you dimwit. You're the only one acting recklessly. That was when the soldier realized that he was the only one moving to attack Mark. The others had all their attention to the naked girl inside the dresser. It was when the soldier decided to take a closer look at the child, he was then frozen. This is a child, the soldier murmured. Mark finally let go of the soldier and crouched down on the dresser. Mark, what is this? The general asked. The proof he wanted. Mark replied, looking at the speechless sergeant. Inside the dresser was the first girl that attacked Mark the last night. She had the most prominent demon traits among the 3 children, and that was why Mark chose to show her. This is a demon? Lieutenant McCopigal asked. Yes and no, Mark replied. This girl is a feral demon I captured last night. It's more accurate to say that she is turned into a demon but failed, and it's the result. The soldiers tried to approach but flinched back when the girl started glaring and throwing a tantrum after seeing them. Don't approach too much, Mark warned. She only recognizes humans as food. If she's not restrained and gagged, she will start attacking. General Padilla contemplated a bit and asked, "You said that this girl was turned into a demon. Does it mean that?" "That's right. The demons in Bato are the ones who did this. It's possible that they also did this to the people that you guys said that vanished. Well, if not worse." "What's worse than being turned to something like this?" Lieutenant McCopigal asked with an audible gulp of saliva. "Turned into food, and for women, breeding hosts." Mark replied nonchalantly. It was at this time that Sergeant Ballesteros fell on his knees. "You're lying," the sergeant murmured. "I already said earlier, there's no merit for me to lie here. It's not like you guys are paying me to hear what you guys wanted to." At this point, Sergeant Ballesteros punched the ground hard simultaneously. His fists began to bleed. The other soldiers could not help but restrain him and bring him back to the outpost. "What's wrong with that guy?" Mark asked the general, watching the scene. However, it was Lieutenant McCopigal that answered. "It must have been very hard for him to hear what you revealed." The lieutenant sighed. Ballesteros came from a family of soldiers and the youngest of 3 brothers. About 2 months ago, his 2 older siblings were sent to attack the rebel outpost in San Miguel. However, the communication to their squad was cut off before they could even reach the boundary. They were among the first instances of mysterious disappearances in Bato. So, that's why. Mark shrugged. If that was almost 2 months ago, his older brothers should be long gone now. The soldiers around Mark could not help but look at him. They could not understand how Mark could speak such words without a shred of empathy.